this place has better network. All right, so yeah, hi Henry, it's here. Hope everyone is okay. I'm sure everybody's ready. Yeah, Mr. Black, I just hope everybody's just respectful, because debate is respectful engagement. That is all from me. Oh yeah. However, I think let's just kick off with roll call. Is Prop here?
Yeah, Prop is here.
Fully constituted?
Yes.
Okay. Op. Is Op here? Opposition? Is opposition here?
Yeah, we're here.
Okay, is opposition fully constituted? Or someone's going to iron? I will take that as a no. I'll take it as everyone's food is constituted. So yeah, it's lunchtime. Yeah, so it's lunchtime. Let's get this show on the road. I hope everybody has the motion. First speaker, whenever you are ready.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Was that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. I'm beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. Chair, realize that celebrities or authority figures in the world have a burden to act in a way that is not detrimental to their following or their followers. That necessarily means that they are not supposed to portray morally questionable actions or traits that may compromise the morals of their followers. Since these celebrities are largely followed and they're largely idolized and believed in, if they do this, it means that their followers may start to pick up on those traits or pick up on those morally questionable behaviors. Following this, we as team proposition support the motion. So what exactly does scrapping of these gambling and betting ads look like? One, it mainly looks like removing anything to do with betting companies or gambling companies from the t-shirts that the players of this Premier League club many companies that actually want to sponsor them and can't sponsor them. So in the case of these betting companies actually refusing or withdrawing their sponsorship, they have more companies that they can fall back on and they can rely on to actually sponsor them and uplift them too. We see that there are other sources of money that these clubs have, things like ticket sales, things like shirt sales, things like the money they make from streaming their matches. This is much more than any money that they can get from the betting sponsorship, from the betting or gambling companies. If you look at the statistics, the sponsorship from these companies make up, like, let's say 30 million euros. Yet from all other sources, these companies, these clubs are making like 450 million euros. So if you look at it like that, the money these betting and gambling companies actually contributing is mainly just a drop in the bucket, and it won't affect these clubs that much. And the third thing that will happen in the unlikely scenario is that these clubs will come up with more efficient ways of handling their money, since they see that, since they will see that maybe, okay, these betting companies, that means that we should come up with more ways and better ways to handle our money in case a scenario where another sponsor leaves them or anything else that happens. So, Chair, what is our first argument as team proposition? Our first argument is the impact having these betting or gambling ads on the t-shirts will have on the audience. How does this come about? Realize from what I told you before that a lot of people actually follow the Premier League and follow the clubs. That means they have a large following and a large fan base. And a lot of people base their lives or base a lot of their things they do on the clubs that they support or on the clubs that they follow. That means they're more or less willing to believe what the players of that particular club to say or promote or do. They will believe that that is right and that is correct, and there is no issue with it since the people who they follow and support are doing it. So now that means that comes in a way that you see them spending a lot of money on merchandise that the clubs promote or produce. They spend a lot of money. They continuously spend or support their clubs in various ways and various platforms. So now, when these die-hard fans see a betting or a logo of a company on the t-shirts of the club that they support, they'll be curious and they'll start to actually investigate and see what does this company do? Why is it on that t-shirt of my club or the club I support? And then they will see that it is a betting company. And since they are seeing their idols or the club that they support and believe in what they say is promoting it, they'll believe that, okay, there's nothing wrong with this. Since the people that I idolize, the people who I support, and the people who I believe anything they say, promoting it, there may be nothing wrong with this. So that means they'll be more inclined to actually go ahead and bet. They'll be more inclined to actually they'll lose all previous inhibitions or previous notions that betting is bad, since the people they mainly follow actually promote it. Now, we believe this applies especially for the children who follow the Premier League, since we see that a lot of the audience who follow Premier League are children. And since children's minds are impressionable, that means they will be the most affected by this. So that means that more children will be indoctrinated into the action or the habit of betting. We see that this is actually the case currently, since statistics have shown that the number of children who are losing money or who are betting has greatly increased. That's why we see that betting companies have become more prosperous, because the main people who are starting to flood to them right now are children, because they're seeing that people who they idolize actually promote it. Now, opposition may come in and tell us that, okay, yes, that may be true, but betting companies have certain measures in order to prevent children from actually betting. But realize that, one, those measures aren't actually stringent, or they actually aren't effective enough to keep a majority or any children out. Second of all, in this current day and age where things like hacking, where things like being able to steal someone's identity, or a lot of things that technology is capable of, we see that children are actually able to bypass any such restrictions that the betting companies actually put in place. So that means that children will still be able to access the betting companies and still be bet. So when that happens, we believe that these people will actually start losing money because of the debate, and that will negatively impact their lives, since they will not be able to actually provide for themselves. With that, I rest my case.
All right. Thank you, PM, for that submission. Thank you, Prop One, for that submission. Let's first opposition. Here.
Hey, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Sorry, let me just set my timer so that I can begin. Hopefully my network is okay, right?
Yes, it's okay, your network.
Anyway, okay, I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Essentially, sports is a ministry which is supposed to join different groups of individuals across the globe. And that is why we see events like the Olympics and World Cup being set up within society. We think for this ministry to survive, we need full-on engagement from the fans, which side proposition hinders. We oppose this motion. Two burdens on side opposition. Firstly, why we get essential benefits from betting ads on the front of club shirts, and secondly, why the counterfactual wealth that we then get necessarily from side proposition is then harmful. Two things to note on setup before I move on to engagement. Firstly, what is the nature of the English Premier League? We think that the nature of the English Premier League is threefold. Firstly, it is one of the most popular and widely watched football leagues globally, attracting a wider fan base. Secondly, its matches are broadcast within numerous countries, contributing to widespread appeal. And thirdly, due to a massive following, there is a wider need of income to extend these services to different places. Important to note that this league then thrives on lucrative broadcasting deals, partnerships, and sponsorships. What this essentially means that the different individuals who normally sponsor what the sports clubs then give out, or like the different equipment that they have, include the betting clubs, they include the gambling clubs. So this particular instance, they then become very important to the moving on of this particular sports. Secondly, we think the implication of gambling and at the front of shirts is twofold. Firstly, it acts as advertisement for these gambling clubs. For example, these get revenue, right? And at a point in time where they get revenue from different individuals, they then can use this revenue to finance clubs and brand different things that these clubs then necessarily use within the vast majority of instances. But we also think, secondly, they encourage different groups of individuals to then necessarily join sports and to love sports, which then means that sports is then going to get a higher fan base, right? On our stance, we think that if the problem is children then engaging in gambling or engaging in like these different things the side proposition says, we think then governments have to then put in measures, or they have to intensify the measures that they necessarily have to stop children from then carrying out these particular things. Two arguments within our speeches. Firstly, on how our side of the house then instigates global connection in sports when we do not ban these sorts of advertisements at the front of t-shirts. But also secondly, on the financial implications that we necessarily face when we literally carry out their side of the house, which is then going to come in our second speech. Moving on to engagement, we get two major arguments from side proposition. Firstly, to do with like how they still receive sponsorship on their side of the house when they remove these different things from the sports t-shirts. Three responses. Firstly, we think the biggest representation that these different gambling places then get is on the front of t-shirts, right? At a point in time where you then remove it from the front of t-shirts, right? It then necessarily means that these clubs, these gambling places are then not going to get that enough revenue at the end of the day. This then leads to falling out of these gambling places from the whole field of sports, which then necessarily means that these clubs can then not get this sort of sponsorship due to like the bankruptcy that we then see on their side of the house. But also secondly, right, we think that even if there's still some income that they receive from these gambling places or from different places, we think that income is then less, which necessarily means that these clubs can then not prosper within the vast majority of instances because they don't have the income to advertise. They don't have that massive advertisement that they would have had to then pull funds to come from there for their games. Thirdly, we think that sports gets a lot of advertisement from these gambling places at the end of the day. And in a world where they are then in existence, then different individuals can then not understand the whole idea of sports, or they cannot join together for the cause of sports, then sports falls out within society. Secondly, we get an idea on how individuals should, these sports people are then people who these different children then follow in the vast majority of instances, and that means they shouldn't portray morally questionable ideas to these children. Three responses, right? We think that this is an assertion because we never really do get why gambling is something that is inherently bad within society. For it to then exist within this debate, we needed to get that sort of analysis, which never then comes out. You can't credit that argument. Secondly, even if we had gotten that particular analysis, we think the whole nature of humanity is based on accepting the idea that individuals are then in the right mind to then create their own. Individuals are then in the right mind to then make up their own decisions, which are then necessarily good. That is why we allow people to take alcohol, even if alcohol is harmful. We think to accept humanity, we then have to necessarily allow people to do things in their best interest, or people to then do things that they necessarily want at the end of the day in order to acknowledge humanity. And this is something that is important because if we don't then accept humanity, we then fall out on like the true meaning of life individually. Thirdly, we think that just like the way we put sin taxes on alcohol and what, governments can then reinvigorate different measures that have been on status quo to stop children from necessarily doing this. This is something that is not really hard to do. Moving on to our first argument, which is on how we then instigate global connection. Right? The premise of this argument is that betting ads at the front of club t-shirts are the biggest form of advertisement for gambling companies. Why is this true? Two things. Notice that many individuals watch football matches that are then broadcast on TVs, and when they watch these football matches, they then see the advertisement of that sort of gambling company at the front. But also, secondly, the nature of the human mind is that it tends to follow what it then sees consecutively, which is basically these gambling ads. The implication of this is that two things. Firstly, more and more individuals then join the field of gambling within sports, but also secondly, the viewership we then get to sports is then to those individuals who firstly are not restricted by societal constraints, which are basically the children who are going to then be restricted by their parents, or the children who are then going to be restricted by the measures put about by the government. But also secondly, individuals who are then genuinely interested in sports. The impact of this particular thing is that firstly, we get enhanced fan engagement within sports. This is because fans can then sit down together in a place to discuss their views on sports games. That is basically the gambling places, right? These gambling places then act as a space where fans can then sit down and then they see and then they speak about these different things within sports. The implication of this is that firstly, we get more attendance to sports because individuals have now gotten the true feeling of sports and they have now discussed and now are very interested to see what then happens next. This implication then means that we then get more revenue on our side of us. But also secondly, we think that it leads to connectivity, right? We think the nature of gambling platforms in of itself is that they join people on online spaces, they join people on different spaces. These people look like people from the United States of America, people from Uganda, people from like Kenya. This necessarily means that you're joining people from different backgrounds and places in order to come down for collective action or to come down for one collective thing. This essentially means that we then achieve the sole purpose of sports, which is to join people. But also finally, it intensifies competition, and that is why we see players striving for better performance in order to fill the egos of their fans. I rest my case.
All right. Thank you, first Bob, for that speech. Let's have second Bob.
Am I loud and clear? Am I loud and clear?
Yeah.
Am I loud and clear?
Yes.
Okay. So I will begin my speech at the count of 3, 2, 1. The major mistake we get from the opposition part of the government is the fact that they do not really understand what sports are. Sports are meant to enjoy, not to frustrate. That's the biggest mistake that they definitely really make in their entire kind of case. They think that people enjoy by betting, but they definitely really forget the impacts of betting. We are definitely even really seeing that the government is definitely coming up and telling us that betting is definitely really addictive and it is very frustrating. We are seeing very many cases whereby people are killing themselves because of the fact that they are betting their money. We are seeing cases whereby children are betting their school fees. Children are betting their parents' money just because of the fact that they are seeing betting. So they also forget about the role of idols in our society. They definitely forget that the people we are speaking about are celebrities with millions of followers, with the whole world listening to them. That's the biggest thing that they definitely forget. And we do really understand that these idols, their main role in this society is to definitely guide us. So if a child definitely sees an ad on their favorite sports personality t-shirt, it will definitely instigate this child to go and see what is definitely going on. And it's going to drive to us what we are telling you in our first speech, that it is going to seem as if it is okay to bet, which are definitely fighting. And the other thing, they definitely forget about what we call competition. They think that competition comes in football due to betting. No, competition comes in football due to fan spirit. We are definitely seeing that there are very many fans who go for these stadiums just to watch their teams play, just to see them and enjoy them. It is not because of betting, because at the end of the day, betting is definitely frustrating. So what are the things that we should note? We should note that a lot of people who watch football are children. We should also know that players are idols to the people. And this effect is that if they, in case they are morally upright, it definitely shows that it is going to cause a big impact in the childs of people. As we have already told you that these children are lacking a sense of thinking twice. They are the people who just go because of the fact that they are seeing their favorite football players into these kind of things. Then we should also really understand the nature of our case. We are removing football ads from shirts, but not denial for sponsorship. They clearly came up and they told us in the speech that we need financial effect, like financial effect. It will lead to a financial effect. But we clearly came up and we told you in our first speech that only 30 million euros is coming from the betting ads, but more than 450 million euros are coming from other kinds of things. So which definitely shows you that these betting ads are only constituting of less than 10% of all the money that is definitely coming to the Premier League. So if less than 10% is this amount of money, this is not really a financial effect, as they're definitely claiming it. And on top of that, we are definitely seeing that these betting ads are not going to leave this side. How? We're definitely going to design this thing in a different way, because we're definitely seeing that there are other ways of advertising these betting companies still using football, but not them being on the jerseys of these football players. Then we should also really understand that our main thing here is to impact betting on the impact of betting on the audience. We should really understand that there is what we call celebrity effect vis-a-vis personal choice. We should really understand that these celebrities, because of their big platforms and their big influence on these people, they definitely instigate, especially these children, into these kinds of betting things. But if we change in this marketing and maybe we put it as posters and all these other kinds of things, we are definitely seeing that there will be what we call personal choice. Someone will be betting because of the fact that they want to bet, not because of the fact that they are seeing a celebrity marketing this betting thing. So you're definitely seeing that this thing being scrapped off, this betting aspect scrapped off, it is not going to become a big effect, because they're definitely seeing that there are very many more other sources that are definitely really bringing in this kind of money. We're definitely seeing that they are speaking of child protection, whereby they are saying that the government can do these things. But we clearly came up and we told you in our first speech that there is hacking, there is fake profile, whereby these children have learned how to definitely get into these systems without them even being noticed. We have realized that all those things it is in the current era whereby these children have really understood computers more than anything. So if on the side of the government, they're definitely trying to protect these children, and they think that this government can be able to do these things, they should really note the fact that currently in the current status quo, very many children are being seen continuing to bet, even though they are saying that betting should begin 25 years and above. How are they even getting this access? They're getting this access because of the fact that they have learned to get fake profiles. They have learned to definitely learn how to hack. And on top of that, these betting companies really need money. So it definitely means that even if someone is having a fake profile, they're not going to stop them from betting, because at the end of the day, they definitely need money. They also come up and they speak of global connection, maybe fun engagement during betting. But we should really note on the fact that this fun engagement that they are speaking about is a very toxic one. A very toxic one that is going to lead to frustration, as we're definitely telling you. This betting is not something that should be really taken slightly. We are giving a scenario of children even reaching at a point of betting school fees. We have seen news whereby children are even committing suicide just because of the fact that they betted their school fees, they failed to get it, and they even failed to run away to go back to their homes to tell their parents that I've betted my school fees. So we're definitely seeing that this is definitely causing a very huge impact into the society. So as much as they're speaking of global connection does not only stand on the fact that it is only betting. We are seeing Twitter engagements as people are definitely engaging on football to discuss about their favorite players. They're definitely coming up to definitely get analysis about football. They are not really necessarily going there just because of the fact that they want to see how much I should bet and how much I should not really bet. They are only going there so that they can be able to see how best their teams are definitely working. And on top of that, they definitely also continue, and then they inform us of ads funding clubs, need for income like sponsorships and everything. But they have told us one thing that we have really understood. Betting is part of sports. And if betting is part of sports, it means that the best way to market this betting is through sports. But for us, we are changing the chronological order. We no longer want this betting ads to appear on shirts, but it is okay, they can appear on posters and everything. So this can create a personal choice. Someone can be able to bet because they want to, not because of the fact that they are seeing their favorite celebrity is definitely influencing them into betting. That is the biggest thing that they definitely forget on their kind of case. And on top of that, on their kind of case, they're definitely not understanding that we are dealing with children. Children are people who are definitely having a wild minds. They're definitely the people who are being instigated by their moves in their bodies. So it definitely means that a child cannot really think twice, provided that the person they're speaking about is their idol. So if we are speaking about these children's idols, we should really understand that this is something that is very sensitive to these children. That's why I'm definitely saying that this idol should not be instigating such immorality into these children, because this is a very dangerous thing. Betting is even addictive. They even write it there. But because of the fact that the way we are definitely putting it up on board is the wrong way, that's why I'm definitely saying that this betting is definitely continuing. So our main argument definitely really comes into the impact of debate of betting on the effect, especially for the children, like when they are lacking access and all these other kinds of things, which they definitely do not understand. So they was mainly standing on 2 points. They are definitely standing on global connection. They're also standing on the financial effect. But as we have clearly eliminated this, we should really understand that this global connection is not only being brought up by betting. We are seeing Twitter polls. We are seeing all these engagements on TVs and on all these different social media platforms. They are not about betting. They are about to see which player is winning, who's taking this, the barundo, everything. All these things are just happening as fun liking. So I hereby conclude my speech. Thank you.
Speaker, when you see the message that says time in the chat, it means we are not considering anything beyond that. So also teams are highly encouraged that you take POIs and also give them. Yeah, it goes a long way to make the engagement better. So thank you very much, second proposition for that speech. You can kindly mute. Let's have second opposition.
My time will begin in 3, 2, 1. If the roof was to have a hole in it, side affirmative believes that Side affirmative believes that if it were to rain, it's better to actually mop than actually solve a problem with the roof. In their characterization, they come and tell us that we're not going to take away the sponsorship of gambling ads, but rather what we're going to do, we're just removing them from the chat. Now, how does this characterization become problematic in the world side affirmative is trying to paint to us in today's debate? Now, they don't give us terms on where the sponsorship will stop. So at the end of the day, this means these sponsorships can actually go onto these clubs' profiles such as Instagram and Twitter. These clubs are free to put these betting apps on the billboard. And these companies are free to continue using these club sponsorship. They're free to continue using the celebrities in the clubs to continue advertising this, but as long as it's not on the shirt. So you come to realize every argument that they have given to us about the role of an idol in society comes back to their side of the world. Since if these are no longer going to be put on the ads, these companies are going to try to find a way to remake the money they're going to make. They're going to find a way to try to put back all this to be shown to the people. So this means celebrities would continue branding out these betting companies, but they'll just not be doing it on their shirts. This means this is a player going to hold up a billboard on the club's Instagram profile. So at the end of the day, the children are still going to see this. The vulnerable groups are still going to see this. So the entire argument of what celebrity role that becomes trashed out in their characterization alone. So now what do we also bring to you? Then they also come to say that sponsorships won't be lost throughout other sales such as tickets. But then we need to remember which clubs in the Premier League are being sponsored by such. These are clubs such as Burnley, clubs such as West Ham, clubs such as Wolves. These are clubs which are actually not making as much money as side affirmative is actually trying to paint to us today. So these are clubs which are actually in their need for almost any source of money they can need. These are clubs which actually need the 30 million which they can need. So at the end of the day, that entire thing of that it won't actually be a big joint doesn't count, since these are clubs which don't make money, the clubs which are being sponsored by such either way. Then ethical principles, they come to say that children, at the end of the day, we live in a world children can fake out profiles. This is a world where people can do A, B, and C so that they can continue to go and betting. But now let's put out the regulatory measures. First of all, we try to paint you in a world. This is a world where parents are equally telling their children the harms of betting. This is a world where the government is continuously advertising that betting is bad, A, B, and C. So we come to show you there's actually no direct correlation between a club shirt and someone going to betting, but rather with all these harms being put about with all these harms being put into the faces of these people, this comes to show you that the correlation between betting, even between the shirt and the person betting, the correlation now rather come to this person is actually going to take themselves to bet of his own will, of his own freedom of choice. So say affirmative trying to show us that the shirts are what are causing people to go bet doesn't work in today's debate. So now in our first speech, they said I'll come show you the financial implications this has on the Premier League. So now let me first take you through it. Competitiveness. I've already tried to picture you that most of the clubs which are already being sponsored, clubs such as Burnley and West Ham, these are clubs which don't already have the biggest financial set pool. Now, if these clubs are losing a good amount of money, that 30 million, which could have helped them develop talent, buy new, now be put out on the lower ladder already, since they are not as money. So this means the league is going to be monopolized by clubs such as Man City, which already had bigger sources of finances. So now, if these clubs are now already not competing at the best level because they have cut away their finances, this means that people who are actually into these clubs, these are fans who are actually going to be angry. These are fans who are no longer going to satisfaction watching this team, since they no longer actually have the will to go watch the club because their entire source pool has been cut out. Now, if the fans are no longer happy watching that, this means the Premier League is going to lose views. And we already showed you that this is something which is mostly looking through its broadcast, through its sponsors and everything. Now, if its broadcasts are now reducing because the fans are now unhappy, this now comes back to the Premier League. Now, if the fans are no longer there, that means the Premier League is now going to lose other sources of funding. Most sponsors are going to be lost in the Prem, since they are going to sit down and realize it's no longer actually as beneficial to put our money in the Prem because not a lot of people are tuning into the product. Now, if Prem loses now broadcasting and sponsors, this means the Prem is now going to lose money. Now, the Prem losing money, this now goes against the entire Prem. This means this is going to be something which is no longer going to be as entertaining for the people. This is going to be something killing the entire essence of the sport itself. This is going to have what? This is going to be a danger for the Prem. So when we scrap off that, now we see how it affects the Prem through a financial implication, which is being caused about killing of competitiveness. Now, second thing I bring to you in our argument is now. The second thing I bring to you into our argument is now, if the Prem is losing money, now it has already killed the essence of the sport. Now, the people who are actually investing in the Prem already, now this is the government, the people who are being brought about, the global harmony the Prem is bringing. Now, these people are no longer going to have that thing which is going to unite them. These are people who are no longer going to have that same bonding. So at the end of side negative would try to believe that in our world that this will continue to exist without the betting, but we show you that without the betting, the Prem will get affected. So people are no longer going to actually have the morale to keep on watching the product, which means people are no longer going to enjoy the essence of sports. So now, if people are no longer enjoying the sense of sports, people are no longer bonding, which they believe can still be got on their wall, but they come and show you direct links on how that doesn't count about on their side. So in summary, what I give you about their case is how it's already controversial in their characterization that they choose to show how the celebrity idol is still going to continue putting out this company. And then, but on top of putting out the company, we come to show you that celebrities actually branding this isn't actually the direct correlation between betting and the product. No, that correlation comes between people's choice to go there because they are constantly being shown on the day. And then we show you how that these teams can't actually make other sales, since we show you the kind of teams which are actually being sponsored by the Premier League. Then we show you how the Premier League gets affected in a bigger picture through how its financial implications go about. So in short, we believe side of negative win this case because first of all, we show you a flaw inside affirmative case. Then we show you how this comes to bite the Premier League. I phrased my case.
Thank you, Speaker, for that submission. Let us have a third position. Here.
Hope I'm audible, and I'll begin my. Okay, wonderful. Let me just set my timer. Okay, I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. So part of the main idea you have to particularly get from this particular resolution is that we are scrapping these sponsorships from the front of the shirts, not from the whole entire teams. We tell you that they can exist on billboards, they can exist on portals, they can exist on the website of these particular teams, not these particular individuals as players. Players and celebrities fear retaliation from the social grounds. They do not take up these particular sponsorships simply because they do them. If they do them as individuals, then they are going to actually face backlash from their fans. This actually happens when I tell you that the celebrities, when they come and tell you that the celebrities are going to still do the advertisements for the people, they don't do this. They only do it under the team. Now, the moment the team scraps it from the front of its shirts, it will not have the guarantee to actually sponsor these particular individuals and make them make adverts for these particular people. The individuals, the celebrities cannot make this particular advertisements for these particular sports, because they know, for these particular betting apps, because they already know that they can face public scrutiny, and they only do this under the guidance of particular teams. They tell you that people require freedom, people have people's freedom to bet, so on and so forth. But Pano, we tell you that we are just trying to create self-actualization. We're trying to remove the influence of the particular individuals who are actually going to be putting on these particular t-shirts. Thirdly, they're talking about the monopoly of the fact that the rich teams, the rich clubs are going to actually dominate from their first speech. But Pano, we tell you that we are not totally scrapping away the sponsorship of these particular clubs, but we're just removing them from the front of the shirts. Secondly, we are telling you that football has a wide access to market. Many companies that are not betting apps do want to actually sponsor these particular clubs, but the football clubs decide to choose these particular betting apps simply because they feel like, someone is involved in football. Why don't we accept them to sponsor us? But they're not the only people who can sponsor them. So even if you tell me that rich clubs are going to still monopolize, right? Does that really count? Because of the three arguments I'm going to give you when I dig into Raima's speech. They tell you that when the clubs start losing because they don't have enough money to buy players, and then they start to actually, right now, Manchester United is losing a lot of games, but the stadium is still full, right? The fan base is still growing, and it's still as high as it has been, right? Fans still come up for these particular games because they think it's actually going to improve, right? Even if we see that clubs that are under Premier League, the ones that are always losing games, right? Like maybe clubs like Southampton that are not even in the Premier League anymore, but actually these particular clubs still have their fan bases, and they still get their fans to come and watch the games. In the end of it, it doesn't controversially show that if at all the club is losing, it's going to lose its fan base. And they tell us that it's going to affect the Premier League, so on and so forth. But part of the principles of the Premier League, first of all, are not to monopolize or to make money, but they are to actually spread unity and to spread entertainment. But this particular concept of the fact that people are going to lose games and then the money is going to start being lost doesn't necessarily come in to show you, but because these particular people are patriotic to their particular clubs and they're not going to actually lose interest simply because the club is losing. Let me dig into Raima's case. The first principle she brings to you is that these particular clubs require the funding to actually spread the broadcast, so on and so forth. They require every single penny, right? But Pano three rebuttals to this particular thing. The principles of football are not capitalism, but they are unity and entertainment. This particular thing, in the worst case scenario, cannot affect them simply because they don't consider things like making profits. But secondly, we also tell you that we are actually going to acquire other friendly ads, right, to actually come on the front of the shirts. It does not necessarily mean that if at all we scrap off the betting apps ads, we're not going to put any other ad there. That's not what the resolution says, right? So particularly, they are still going to get the money that they require, and at the end of it all, we tell you that the football has a wide access to market. This is going to be so easy because many companies want to sponsor the football, to put their ads on the shirts, simply because they know that football has a wide access to the market. Not accepted. And we also tell you the third rebuttal to this particular principle is that we're not literally doing away from the whole financing. We're just doing it from the front of the shirts. So in the end of it, you understand that if at all the companies get other friendly ads to put on their particular shirts, it does not controversially mean that they're going to lose the funding that they need, right? They're telling us that these particular things are going to help people join the sports, and then the income is less, and then the sports are also advertising people. Pano, we tell you that betting and gambling is first of all addictive, and it's known for the children. Required and in the prescription that they even give, right? The point of it being addictive, it is more encouraging for a person to actually engage in their gambling if at all they see that their favorite person is actually putting it on a shirt, right? So particularly, we tell you that this particular concept comes about because when they even consider that Premier League is very popular. But Pano understand that the Premier League is not the only league that exists, right? If at all these both betting apps go to other particular countries, that is okay with them. But we're actually scrapping them off for the Premier League, and that is what is actually controversial. We also tell you that it's known from the children. And we tell you that regardless of the fact that the government has to particularly bring up principles that are supposed to make them less engaged in this particular sport, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen because there's that big engagement in technology, and the fact that technology is advancing, it makes it easier for these particular children to execute these particular things. And understand that these particular children are children who have mindsets that are so around the fact that they need money, they want money, they always want to have money. So particularly, it doesn't show you that if at all they try to gamble, it's going to first of all be addictive to them at a young age, which is something that is not restrictive. They tell you that the relevance of this particular issue is to join people around the world. But my second speaker tells you that we have we have sports talks that are happening simply because, not because there are people gambling, but people want to just know what's happening on the market. We have Twitter talks, and we are telling you that these particular gambling sites are going to still exist. They're not going to actually be eliminated. They tell you that these particular ads are going to be they happen on the website when people are watching live football, right? Particularly, those things can still exist regardless of the fact that they're not on the front of the shirts, right? Because we believe that the influence of a player over a child or over any other human being is more under harder to criticize than when you actually see it from the whole entire team, right? Particularly teams can have face backlash from this particular thing, but the individuals cannot. When they tell you that the celebrities still do this advertisement on the internet, there's no proof to this particular thing, simply because these particular individuals still do them under the courtesy of the team. They come as a group, as a union, and make this particular advert, right? But when they go outside on their particular thing, they fear retaliation and backlash from the society. That is why they don't do these particular advertisements on their own as individuals. So in the end of it all, you understand that particular thing cannot be considered in this particular debate. They talk about the competition that is happening in the betting world, right? These particular things need the competition to actually happen so that they can actually survive even more, right? Particularly when you understand this particular concept, understand the other leagues, like the Italian league, there's even a league in Portugal, there's a league in Netherlands. Particularly these particular things can still get the competition they want, they require from the global market that is currently existing with the particular other concepts. But the popularity of the Premier League makes it harder for us to reduce the influence of these particular players from the particular people, right? We are not afraid of the backlash the whole entire team can face from this particular concept. Players on the sexual ground, right? They talk about the fact that people are not going to enjoy the football anymore when it loses money, and the big teams are being capitalistic and they're already getting a lot of money. But understand that these particularly small teams are not inherently, the problem is not about their funding. Most of the time, the problem might also be about the coaches, or maybe the influence of the players and how the players are really want to really play in these particular games, right? The football is something that requires commitment. It doesn't require funds, right? So in a particular point of note, the finances are important, but we show you how they're not also going to exist, right? Let me show you how we win this particular. Oh, sorry. Where's my case?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. The submission.
Here, I would like to begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Now, Chair, what I'm mainly going to do in this debate is provide you the summary and show you how exactly side opposition wins the debate. From first opposition speaker, they talked about how there are many sponsors that the clubs can fall back on, how there are more revenue sources, and how the clubs will come up with more ways to get money. This is inherently false. Why? Because they won't receive, even if they manage to get few sponsors, they won't receive as much money, because the correlation between sports and other things is not as strong as the correlation between sports and betting companies. Inherently meaning that betting companies are more incentivized to invest in sports clubs because it affects them directly. Essentially meaning that their argument that there are other sponsors, they won't receive as much money from those sponsors as they would from betting companies. And we have shown you throughout the second speech how money is inherently important for the clubs to continue to remain competitive and to continue to advance and grow their skills. Then they talked about how they clubs are influential, people follow them and borrow merchandise and buy their merchandise, for example. Then their second speaker comes here and makes a serious contradiction. They talk about how they remove sports betting from the shirts, but still allow for sports betting to be associated with the club. Essentially meaning and premising that argument on the fact that people still have the freedom of choice. So if they have the freedom of choice to differentiate between the betting company and their own clubs, then they also have the freedom of choice to differentiate between the sponsor of the club and the club itself, regardless of the fact that it's on a shirt or it's on a billboard or it's on another thing. So inherently meaning that in their argument, they concede to the fact that there is still freedom of choice, even though the club is still being sponsored by the betting company. Now moving on to their second speaker, rejected. Moving on to their second speaker, they talked about they talked about how the competition comes with the funds, and yes, it does. And the betting companies, when they're sponsored through these shirt deals, they actually encourage the fans to engage more with the sport and make it more lively, inherently meaning that there's going to be more spending and more income with the clubs, and there's a lot of benefit people engaging in clubs. And they talked about children. Now notice that we gave you 3 mechanisms of why children are catered for. Notice that children still have parents to guide them and tell them the differences or the difficulties of gambling. Then there are also governmental restrictions on children engaging in gambling. The cases or impacts they talk about children having gambling are in places where the restrictions are not as strong or as efficient as, for example, in Uganda, where people can still engage in gambling despite the fact that they are underage. However, in places where restrictions have adequately been put in place, such as England, you find that the instances where children engage in betting are far lower and actually almost zero because of the stringent methods that are already in place. So what would further do is improve on the restrictions that are in places such as Uganda and Kenya and Tanzania, where children can bypass security measures. Then they talked about how children take influence from the celebrities and how they follow their influence. But we showed you how the mechanisms that were put in place, from parental guidance to peer guidance to governmental guidance, prevent children from engaging in betting, and they don't necessarily have the drive and willpower to do it. Then they talked about how they talked about the principles of football, unity, entertainment, etc., etc. But notice, for the EPL to remain competitive, even since we're talking about the English Premier League, it needs to continue to have more funds and leverage that it has over these other clubs and other European leagues. So essentially meaning that for the EPL clubs to continue to grow and to continue increasing their fan base, they'll need finances that they're getting from these Premier League clubs. Notice that I've talked about and showed you why betting companies are essentially responsible for most of the funding that's coming to this club. Then they try to talk about how there was the shirts, like why exactly remove it from the shirts. But notice that if the betting company is not seeing its image or logo being put out there, it's then incentivized to actually advertise and to promote this club. Essentially meaning that when you remove their logo from the shirt, the betting company is more likely to actually withdraw all kind of sponsorship from the club, because it's not getting the kind of viewership that it essentially needs. And notice that on our side, we still have restrictions on children that prevent them from engaging in kinds of gambling. And then also consider to the fact that people still have the freedom of choice, those who are at the age of gambling, essentially meaning that people still have the freedom of choice regardless of whether or not the gambling logo is on the shirt. Before I continue, I take your POI.
Do children watch football or not?
Notice that what he's trying to imply is that children watch football and engage in gambling, which is an inherently false one, because children don't have the capacity to engage in gambling because they need money and finances. Children need inherent knowledge to actually be beneficiary and continue engaging in gambling, which is something that majority of young people do not have. That is why gambling is more available to adults and people who are over age. One, because they have a capacity to engage in it, and two, because they have the knowledge to continue to engage in it. Now, moving on to the question of debates, they talked about how gambling and its impacts on children. But we're able to show you that there are enough mechanisms, and if those mechanisms are properly executed, children are still protected on our side. And two, they're able to show you how people still have the freedom of choice to engage in gambling, whether or not, and adults, people who are being advertised to, still have the freedom of choice. Then the other clash on this debate was on the financial limitations that these clubs will get from removing the sponsorship and the brand deals. Notice that we're able to show you how, by removing the logo from the shirt, the betting company is less incentivized to invest in that club, essentially meaning that it's going to lose a significant portion. And the clubs that rely on these betting companies are usually lower income clubs that don't gain as much traction and attention as such as a big club such as Man City, inherently meaning that they rely more on this sponsorship to continue to grow their investments and to grow their club. So we're able to show you how removing the shirt will remove the sponsor, essentially knocking out their case at their other sponsors. Then they also talked about how they can receive sponsors from other business organizations. But I'm able to show you why betting companies are essentially the most important kind of organization to bet in these football clubs, because they have a high correlation, because they are related, and henceforth they could generate more income for each other. Because you can't tell me that if a kitchenware company starts to sponsor a football club, more people are going to be as involved in kitchenware because they saw their football club having it. So on that note, weighing up this debate, I'm able to show you why on our side we actually take it. With that, I rest my case.
All right. Thank you very much for that submission. I guess now we are going to be moving to reply speeches. So Op should do the honors of giving us the reply speech. Yeah, so
Hey, I audible. Okay.
Yes, you are.
I'm going to start my 3 minutes, right?
Yes, 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Side proposition continuously tells us that gambling is bad, but we never really get any clear analysis as to why betting is something that is inherently wrong and harmful. The only thing that we get from side proposition is that it is addictive, and they do not necessarily tell us why addiction is actually something that is bad, or how addiction then comes about on their side. Notice that their whole case is premised on this argument that means they cannot stand because the argument was not fully mechanized or mechanized at all. But also, secondly, we still tell you that on our side of the house, even if it was mechanized, we tell you that individuals and their autonomy has to then be accepted within society. That looks like allowing adults to go gamble when they want to gamble because they inherently have the knowledge and they are rational actors. And at the particular point in time, they necessarily then know what is best for them, which is basically the gambling that gives them the happiness that they want. But also, finally, we still tell you that just like in status quo, how we put sin taxes on alcohol and individuals who are below the age of 18 cannot take alcohol, we think it then becomes easier for government to then put sin taxes or to then restrict younger children from gambling, or even if it's not the government, basically parents can put measures to stop their children from gambling, as what is happening on status quo. We then still take this debate. Secondly, we get an idea on how they still receive sponsorship from their side of the house, right? They necessarily bench on this whole idea as to how they then take the debate. We tell you that this is then wrong because of two things. We firstly tell you the biggest representation that these clubs then these gambling places then necessarily get from sports is through the front of these t-shirts. And at a point in time where that then necessarily doesn't exist, it then means that they cannot get that sort of revenue that they would have had to then sponsor the sports club. That means that sports club then don't get the money at the end of the day. But also, secondly, even if they say that advertisement still exists, we still tell you that the advertisement that necessarily comes in at this particular point in time is less. And when advertisement is less, the fan base then becomes small and you then can prosper within the society. But also, finally, right, we tell you that the fact that football is something that is big, that drains a lot of individuals from outside, even if you have other sponsors, or even if you have a wide pool of sponsors, every sponsor counts, which necessarily means that these betting clubs still count and their sponsorship is still needed within the sports because there's something that is big and something that is inherently good. And then finally, what do we tell you from our side of the house? We tell you firstly that on our side of the house, we then instigate global connection through like this whole gambling and joining people from different online, different nationalities to then come for our cause, which is basically sports. And at the end of the day, we firstly get connectivity, which is basically one of the sole principles why sports then exist. But also, secondly, right, we get more revenue and more attendance to sports in the vast majority of instances. But also, finally, right, we tell you that on our side of the house, we then cater for the sports clubs in the sense of sponsor. I rest my case.
Okay, thank you for that. We can have Prop's reply speech now.
Okay, am I audible? Am I audible?
Yeah.
What? Am I audible? Okay, let me take that as a yes. So I will begin my reply speech in 3, 2, 1. The biggest thing that the opposition part of the government does not really understand is the effect of addiction. We clearly came up in our second speech and we showed you the effect of addiction on gambling in children. We clearly showed you a scenario whereby children are betting their school fees, children are betting they are even betting their parents' money, even reaching at a point whereby they are even going to commit suicide. That's because of the fact that they can no longer return this money. Because of then, who's pushing them to debate? We are seeing that they are not being pushed because of themselves, but they are being pushed because of the idol, the celebrity effect. We clearly came up and we asked the third speaker a very good question of, do children watch football or not? And they clearly told us that children do really watch football. So if children do really watch football, who is at the center of attention? It is a football player. So which means that if a football player is at the center of attention of a child, it means that a child is in position of seeing whatever that is written on the shirt, hence pulling the instigation. As much as they definitely really come up and they tell us that there are restrictions in other countries and everything, but we should really tell you that by the time a child gets that thing in their mind and realizes that I would like really to see betting, they are willing to do anything, even if it means to bet triple the money required. They'll definitely really go through that. So they really clearly come up and they speak about finances, telling us that betting is the biggest thing that it brings money to football. But we clearly came up in our first and second speech and we told you that all the ads that are being sponsored in the Premier League are more than 450 million euros. Yet betting is only constituting of 30 million euros, which is less than 10%, which they fail to really understand. And as much as they definitely really came up in their second speech and informed us that some of these small teams really need this money, but they definitely really forget about the fact that these teams are not being small because of the fact that they are lacking ads. as we clearly told you in our third speech, the reason why these teams are still small is because of maybe coach effects and the fact that they are not yet well chronologically organized. So they definitely really come up and they tell us about the whole idea of influence. The whole idea of influence, whereby they think that, whereby they think that, these people are going to death due to the fact of choice. But we're telling you that there is what we call idle influence in this, whereby someone is instigated into this because of a celebrity. Like we told you in our first speech, that these people are playing a very big role in the society. They even come up and they tell us that these celebrities will continue marketing this betting app. But we clearly told you that in the current status quo, these celebrities do not market these betting apps on their own. These betting apps on their own, they market them under the team. And on their own, they do not do this because they are afraid of the backlash that will come from the public, because they do really understand their role. So they only do this under the team, but they do not do this personally, which they definitely fail to understand. They kind of and they tell us of global unity. But we clearly told you in our second and third speech that the very thing is very clear. People are still talking about football. People are still continuing to engage themselves on football online and everywhere. And they are not speaking about the betting money. They're not speaking about all those things, but they're speaking about team spirit. Then this really brings you back to team spirit. People are having team spirit. It is not, football is not a gambling engagement. It is a sport made for enjoying. So I definitely think that people who are fans of different clubs still continue to watch their football clubs, even though there is betting or there is no betting, because of the fact that they have what we call fan spirit. So even though they definitely really come up and they show us that gambling is the reason why there is unity, but we do really believe that team spirit is the reason why there is unity. So conclusively, in our speech, we win on the fact that we show the impact of debate on children and on the entire society, and the need to remove this celebrity influence and to instigate what we call personal autonomy. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that submission. So I want to know if me and Belinda are going to deliberate, or we can just give our feedback here.
Yeah, excuse me, sir, but you're a little bit not audible. It is very hard for us to hear you
Oh
clearly.
yeah.
So if you don't
As
mind,
inquiring, as requiring from Coach Joseph. So are we going to go and deliberate, or we have to just give the feedback generally?
let's just give the feedback where everything is wrong and it's good to go.
So Belinda, oh,
Well, I do not know whether I got you well. You kindly forgive me for my environment. I am not in the best environment to speak, but I would like to seek clarity before I move forward. Are we giving just our feedback, or you would also want to know which side wins or which side loses, or should we discuss how the debate went or what we think you should be improving on? Kindly, Coach Joseph, guide us on this.
Okay, so what we're going to do is that me and Belinda are going to generally give you feedback on the debate and what you should have done better. So, of course, gentleman's policy, ladies always go first. So she's going to explain, give you feedback on the round and what Belinda says, feels that you guys should have done better. And then I think I'll add on a few things here and there. So sure, Belinda.
All right, this is what I'm going to say. To begin with, I would like to say that all clubs and then lower maybe to individuals. So such a connectivity on my end kind somehow was not gotten or was not felt, because somewhere somehow the debate started and we were wondering what is betting, or what are these betting companies, what do they actually do, and why are these people saying that betting in and itself is bad, yet we have not seen government come up and say there is a complete, so in such a situation where there is no complete ban on betting, so what are you talking about? Where is the problem? We needed to have a ground laying with those things, so that when you're constructing your case, it comes up heavy, it comes up grounded and well constructed. So with those basics, sometimes it is not good when you bring them up in the second and third speech, because who is going to react to them? It's kind of too late and you have already biased us. The other thing that I would like to also talk about is the stakeholders effect. I wanted to hear probably arguments in line with, let's say, how does the ban affect, let's say, the betting companies? How does it affect the viewers? How does it affect the companies, the teams that are playing on both sides, on the proposition team, which was saying no, we need to ban them, and on the side which was saying no, we don't need to ban them from the front views of the t-shirts or of the players shirts and etc. We wanted to hear something like a win-win situation, because if we are saying that, if one team is saying that we need these betting companies because of the incentive they bring on table, because of their contribution, however much they are bad, then can we see a win-win situation? Can we see things being tackled? People talked about children, but it was not conclusive. And somewhere also some things were left hanging. And on my side, I kept putting question tags like what is wrong with betting, or which ones are those other alternative advertisements, or what are those other problems. Talk more about autonomy, talk more about financing. Like, can we drive the points home and get to the end part of it? I'm trying my level best to be as fast as possible. And then finally, as I said, I'll leave the rest to Henry. But please, please connect everything that has been raised, or every player or every party that has been, that has every player or every party that has been brought up in a motion. Thank you very much. I will hand over to Henry, and if there is anything else like knowing which sides won or personal feedback, we shall get to that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Belinda, for that wonderful feedback. So I think personally, I had concerns in this round. I think, firstly, mechanization was generally for everyone. I think mechanization was slightly low. Maybe apart from op one, I got some reasonable level of mechanization of arguments, but I still felt that speakers needed to mechanize arguments more. By mechanization, I mean like the logical flow of your arguments. Sure, I get this is bad and like this is going to get from point X to point Y. But like I always say, you need to break it down. You need to help us understand. I'll point out one thing Props talks about. Says children are going to start betting, but we cannot just get from point of we have to support this ban because children are going to start betting. We need to understand. Am I audible?
No.
Okay. Am I audible now? Oh, okay, yeah. Sorry, I had my earpieces on. Okay. So this is a thing. I think one thing generally teams need to generally work on a lot. I think that I've observed from this round is mechanizing arguments, right? So I think probably Okwan tried to give me some reasonable level of mechanization, and that's cool. But I felt like in general, mechanization was lacking. By mechanization, I mean explaining, giving me the logical flow of these arguments. I'm going to pick out an argument from prop and one from prop. Prop says, it's addictive and kids are going to start betting. I really don't get why. How does a child get access to these betting things in the first place? And how does this child going into betting become addictive? And then the most important link was what we needed to understand. How does someone looking at a bet company logo on a player's shirt going to necessarily mean that this child is going to now start looking for ways of betting, given that they don't even have the capacity to do so? So since they don't have, how does that correlation? How does you seeing the shirt lead to the child going to get the habit of wanting to bet, them getting the money or the capacity to bet, and then leading them to betting, then finally then creating a continuous addictive chain of betting? That was supposed to be the flow of the logic. Now what we got was these things are so spaced up, and then you want us to piece them together. Mechanization is very important because it helps us understand your arguments. The problem, and for any judge, you will find judges are average voters. So it is important for you to make me understand what you want me to understand in the way you want me to understand it. There is you expressing your argument, but me not understanding it in the way you want me to. So the only way that works is if you create that logic or that chain for me to follow up and follow through throughout the debate. When you don't do that, it becomes very difficult for me to understand your arguments, but then your arguments become less persuasive. So you most likely lose that engagement, but then you most likely also don't end up not persuading the judge nor anyone in the debate room. But also that gives less credit to you as a team because it shows you are either towards a slightly average team or a below average team, because at least average teams can mechanize arguments. And I think that goes a long way and is important for all your kind of debates, because as far as debating is concerned, debating is not just going to stop here in the Spar rounds. It goes beyond. So you need to be able to have the capacity to do that. Now, for example, from upside, there was an argument coming out on choice. People need to do things in their best interests. I needed to understand why is people's best interests important over government? Because sure, it's true, people can do things in their best interests and should, but why is that existent? Why is it existent for someone to do something that accrues to them? Why is it so important? Is it necessary for self-actualization? Is it that government has an obligation to make sure that they adhere to that interest? If that obligation is there, where does that obligation exist? There needs to be a flow in which you uphold something, be it a practical argument that Prop wanted to run or a principle argument. There need to be a flow and a precedence in which these things run. There must be a systematic logical flow. Mechanization becomes very and very key. 2, engagement. There are two key things in debate that are very important, and if you don't have them, then you're not actually debating. It is either contribution or engagement. Contribution is the mechanization, the argumentation, and the analysis. Engagement is the comparatives, is the rebuttals. So I think in everything you want to argue, your case is not the only case that exists in the debate round. You need to find a way to tilt your case to be persuasive. Therefore, it's not enough to just explain harms or explain why there are harms in their world or why the other side is bad. You need to explain why your side becomes comparatively better. Because if your argument is people are going to get so addictive and we don't get so much money from them, so we can lose the money. Why is that money something that is expendable? Why is it that we can lose that money and forego it and then move on with our lives to begin with? Like, you need to explain why your argument becomes important. That's why even in, for example, Op 1 speech, there was mechanization to some extent, but then there was no comparative to lead to that particular regard. Like, you need to go deeper into explaining why those things become important, yeah? And you need to really sell that case for me to actually buy it. Otherwise, what's the point of that case if I'm not gonna buy it to begin with? So I think it's important for teams to always understand what to mechanize and what to always do. I think prioritization is also becoming should be a very important aspect. And deep into explaining what your rebuttal does. If your rebuttal is to for example, Prop's case is that at the end of the day there are checks and balances, you need to explain what that does. How is that information relevant in the round? Probably something like, what this does, Chair, is that the fact that we explain to you that there are checks and balances for parents to be able to notice or to nurture their children properly, and the fact that there are syntaxes and state mechanisms to do so, inherently informs to the ability of state to be able to avert most of these crises. What it does to Prop's case is that most of the mechanisms and the harms they say are less likely going to exist or going to happen. What that means is that because those harms are not going to happen, is that you're less likely going to have that case happening in the round. Therefore, because the biggest argument was the impact on the harms and what is going to happen, you therefore don't have much of a strong case from proposition. So what I've just done there is I've not just given the engagement, I've done what the engagement does to the other case. So deconstruction is beyond just throwing around rebuttals and trying to throw around comparatives. You need to explain what they do to the other case's material. Because the way engagement works is that your material is not the only existing material in that debate. Two, and I think the third thing is on the aspect of points of information. I think there was a drive that was shared in group about how you handle points of information. I think points of information are very crucial. I think to that, and I'll give you this knowledge. Points of information either can be used to re-echo matter that has been probably missed out in the debate from your end. It can be used to deconstruct a case. It can be used to reconstruct a case. It can also be used to seek clarity. Sometimes it's okay for you to be in a position where you really don't get where the debate is going. But for you to sit down and really not get where the debate is going and then present what is not going on is more poisonous than you not asking for clarity. So if you believe that there is something that is not clear and has not been made clear by the other teams, you always ask a point of information for clarity, especially in the first minute. Speakers always give this. Next is the point of information that is used to like take down an argument. Those are the common ones. Deconstruction of an argument. So sometimes either teams use like a question to show how is this going to work and how does that going to do it. Or a team can use this point of information to use their 15 seconds to explain how that mechanism is not going to work. For example, Chair, X may most likely not happen. If Prop is going to assume that case, then they need to prove why is most likely going to be a necessary thing to have in the debate. So you are then deconstructing that argument and you're requiring Prop to then probably respond to that. I think it becomes important for you to probably run things along that line and get points of information to deconstruct that argument. I think the next one is on probably re-echo matter that has not been there. I think re-echoing matter. For example, you find that the debate goes deep to like the third speech. And you find that probably this team is ignoring what your first speaker talked about. You can simply raise a POI and re-echo some of these things and say probably the framing that my first speaker gives you explains why you most likely do not need to have that kind of like motive or need to have that kind of alternative. You need to explain why it's necessary, even given the framing and context we give you. Then you explain that, right? So I think it becomes comparatively important that you use that information to go a long way to explain that, like to explain or to echo that analysis. Because sometimes judges may note them down, but because the debate gets so heated, you find that there's less attention to that kind of argumentation. It's important to bring it back in the debate because it helps your team win. Next is on just clarity. Sometimes teams don't really have the clarity, like he's going in a very different direction. Sometimes clarity is not just for you to ask to get clarity, but for you to also help someone else, like provide clarity in the round. Because judges can also are also human beings, and in most cases, sometimes people use rhetoric to mislead them. You need to probably sometimes it can be chair masters this analysis is intuitive. This debate is not necessarily about how you achieve that. I think this debate is about how you most likely get on the other end. So you need to explain that clarity so that it helps to clear the room and also helps the debate get direction. You see, debate is not just about you throwing your case there and winning. It's about making the most and the best engagement. You can't make the best engagement if you don't set a precedence or an environment where a proper environment where that engagement can happen. That's why messy debates exist, because one team has it all together, the other team doesn't. So the problem is that it gets messy, that even the team that has it all together may have poor engagement because of the other team. So you need to always keep things in a proper linear flow so that you are able to probably run these things better on. The other thing, you need to match and explain. And like I said, on mechanization, you can do that with act analysis. I think Belinda did a great deal to explain that you need to use those actors and show how they're affected and why they're affected. Not just that, you need to run analysis on why this actor is most likely going to do that kind of things you say they are going to do. If you say kids are going to bet, explain why kids are in the position of betting. It's not just enough to say we've seen kids betting. It's not enough. You need to explain why, what conditions lead those kids there. Because if you say you've seen kids betting, I can as well just say the sky is blue and the sky is red. We are all having assertions here. So the way you do that is, and the way that sets you apart, is explaining how yours is more realistic. Debate is not just about throwing the most persuasive language, right? And it's just about explaining how you most likely achieve, how your things are more likely going to become more realistic. Yeah. So you need to run those arguments to be in a very realistic manner. Those things need to be realistic. You need to explain how you achieve those things, how you get to that point, how you get to point X, how you get to point Y, how you do all those other things. So I think it's important comparatively that you do that. And I think it's very healthy for you as teams to do that in one way or another. I hope I've covered some of the things that may necessarily be essential, but I think if you're going to leave that, I think you should take that back with you and know that it's important that most of those things, in most cases, are generally dealt with. Now, what's the next? I think I'm just going to talk about just the debate in general, and I think how teams did better. I think what Prop says, there is a moral that is morally questionable. So I think I'll try to integrate this with kind of like individual feedback. So they say the betting is a morally questionable behavior, and that there's a lot of money made from it. Now, one, I don't get why it is a morally questionable behavior. If you say betting is bad, it's not enough to Oh, sorry. My network had a problem. So, like I said, it's not just enough to just explain that why yours is generally like enough. I think you need to go an extra end to explain why at the end of the day betting is a bad thing, and why betting is something that is generally inherently unacceptable in society. You need to explain why it is so bad. You don't just say it's questionable because it is intuitive to you as a speaker. You need to make the whole debate and the judge understand it. It's not don't assume that the judge understands it and it is intuitive to that judge. Explain it. I think the next thing is that you say they make a lot of money, but that money isn't necessary. You need to explain why that money isn't necessary. Because, for example, OPCO is a great deal to explain why that money is necessary. So if you had analyzed why that money is not necessary, then you would have mitigated all analysis from OP as to why that money is generally essential. So again, then you say betting is like bad, betting and camp betting and these companies are bad. Why doesn't society like it? Why doesn't society appreciate it? Because Op runs a very good bargain here. They say for them, they say these things are okay because exist because society, there exists for some people in society who need them. Therefore, there is a certain level of acceptance for these things. So you need to explain. You need to explain why that acceptance isn't there, or why the acceptance is greater. Last is on the concept of how children are going to be very many and how they're going to probably do it. I thought there was a very big assertion here. One, how do kids get access to these things? Two, how again is seeing this company? How is this seeing company becoming? How is then this going to like stop companies from doing these things? How is then children betting more likely, especially if you say that they are likely going to be influenced by anything, and they have parents? How are these things most likely going to happen? Like how Belinda said, you don't have to analyze these things, you need to show how they're effective. Again, towards your end at the end of the day. I think the effectiveness of that analysis also does a great deal in the round. You need to probably follow that up. So what OP says then, like generally, is that there's ministries to probably check these things. So it again throws away the whole argument to these people being bad actors, because if they are bad and there are people to check them, you need to explain why even the people who are there cannot check them. But OP says the people to check them and they have the capacity to check them. Next, they argue is market share. So they tell you that most of the money you say that you're going to be getting from short sales and most of these things happens because the betting companies do a great deal of marketing. You throw them off, you then generally most likely going to lose them forever. Because that means if you lose them off the advertising shots, they may most likely not advertise anything else. Prop doesn't explain why, if you remove these people off the shots, they are most likely going to have an incentive to market any other thing for this club. Simply like, if for example, if Arsenal said we don't want Kagame to keep on sponsoring, or to keep on having the Visit Rwanda on our badges, you needed to explain why this thing is going to remain on water bottles, is going because I thought it was very kind of inconsistent. You say that these things are betting is bad, so we should get them off the shots. But then you say betting should remain on all other things connected with sports. So if betting is bad for sports, why should it remain in sports to begin with? There's a very big question there, and I was waiting for Op to run it, but then it came like in third Op speech. So you need to explain, I need to make that causal link. Why is this exclusive other than other circumstances? Probably people follow up the other things more than the other. People buy these things more than the other. You get it. I think it needs to then, you need to then go a long way to explain how most of these things are most likely gonna be effective, right? And why most of those things run in that direction. I really hope that that kind of information is like going a great deal to help you guys. So yeah, again, this is very important again, and I think I'm about to run this again crucially. So I think I already ran mechanization here. Yeah. So there's an argument from open like fake profiles and how at the end of the day this is going to be bad because children are going to do this. Again, you needed to analyze why children are going to be in a position to do this and why they have the capacity to do this. But most importantly, why the checks and balances are not going to help that situation. And then again, you say people are still going to use football. You needed to explain why the situation gets better. Because they can tell that the situation is going to get worse. So if you argue the situation is going to get worse, why should we then buy into your case? I think there was need to analyze that. So again, you guys are not afraid of backlash. Okay, again, why? If you say it's addictive, how? Why? Sports talk still exists about gambling, so there's audience for gamblers. But if there's audience for gamblers, how are you then going to carve out the child's audience from being able to receive? You need to find a way to separate your matter, to avoid the harms that exist from spilling into your case. So you need to be very strategic about the lines of argumentation you run. Therefore, you always have to first think through these things as a team, like prepare. Because perhaps cases like you get more like you lose funding, and then you get more funding on their end, and the end of the day is there. Government discourages, government the parents censor, and there is a very big contention here. So you need to explain why either those things are not enough,
or they're not effective to begin with, and why that calls for you to support the other thing to be existent. Because there's a whole lot of stakeholder analysis from OPAST, how very many individuals are affected. But then there's no analysis from your end, from prop, to explain why most of these things are then generally going to be catered for in your world, or actors are less likely going to be in the way that OP claims they are. So debate is beyond just explaining your case and why it is more likely to happen, but why the things that are going to harm your case are less likely going to happen, and why the things that are going to make your case win are more likely to happen. So nuances are very important in a debate because they help make your case more believable. On any day, judges will always pick the more believable and realistic case because it's closer to what the motion probably wants and what it is. I think there was not so bad appreciation of the motion here, but I think you need to appreciate the motion as it comes, not just in the literal sense, but understand the concepts themselves. How does betting look like as of now? How do these gambling ads work? How are they impacted? How are they effect of this? Why is the debate particularly focusing on the club t-shirts? And again, why is this supposed to be in 2026 and 2027, and why not now? Those are questions that need to be answered from the beginning. So setup is very part and parcel of give the debate direction. That's why I think the debate was a bit kind of awkward from the beginning. But yeah, I think speakers generally, even if you are a substantive speaker, where-ups like comparatives don't just stop at like third speeches. They are very important also in other speeches, even in the very first speech, to explain why your case is better than ours. Because the key to you is to persuade teams all through the round. If you don't do that, then it's going to be very difficult for you to win a round. But aside that, I think I've covered generally everything that should be worked upon. I know you guys can do better and can do far better. I think, okay, the last thing generally is time management. Don't re-echo things. I think you need to take time and take out the most important things. If you believe you have deconstructed as a responsive speaker, I think taking more effort to try to find and re-echo some of the things that are important. Probably explain some of the analysis that you believe that was probably misunderstood, that teams have overlooked, that you believe judges need to listen to give you that win. So you need to use your time efficiently and pure engagement. Again, reply speeches are not opportunity for you to draw your rebuttal. It is just all your new matter. It's an account. An account. You are balancing the books on what the debate has been on the debate. This is a debate. This is what has been going on. This goes this side. This goes this side. This gives you better profits. This is what wins the debate. This is what is more important in the debate than the other. I hope I have been helpful and clear to everyone. If there is any question, you can inbox me on Discord and you can inbox me on WhatsApp. Sure. Thank you. Okay, guys want to know who won. Okay, really, it's a spar round. It doesn't matter who won, but the feedback is more important. But sure. Yeah, it was Op that won this one. Yeah, kudos, I guess. So my WhatsApp number is going to be in the chat. Yeah, you can ask all the things in my chat slightly later on.